All right, let's see, what does my day look like today? All right, so I guess we're doing this. What do I need for this? PowerPoint done, phone camera, tripod. I don't have a tripod. All right, let's fix that. Okay, I think this is what I need, and it's available for pickup in an hour. That's perfect. Oh, no, I don't think I need anything else.
How's it going today?
Good.
Perfect.
1928.
And do you have a photo ID on you?
Yep.
Awesome, thank you much. There you are.
Thank you.
No problem. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. What you just saw is an example of how a lot of companies are turning into technology companies, even though they may not be selling technology related products. And this ties really closely into what I call as customer centric NPD, or new product development, which is what we're going to talk about today. Hi, everyone. My name is Madhukar, and we will talk about NPD today. But before we go too further down that path, let me just take a few minutes to introduce myself. I actually started my career a long, long time ago, back in 1997, in a place far, far away in India. I was a journalist in a newspaper called Hindustan Times. And back then it was the time when the World Wide Web was introduced. So I was one of the folks who decided that we would take the newspaper edition, and for every single page, we will create an HTML page and then post it on the World Wide Web. That really got me addicted to technology and computers. And then from that point onwards, I went on to do my master's in mass communication along with software engineering here in the US. And that started my career here as somebody who was a developer, and then from developer to product management, then on to product marketing. I've been in the Bay Area for roughly about 20 years or so, and I've had the privilege to be at the front and center of the technology revolution that has gone on for the last several years. And I've worked in both small as well as large companies. I started as a developer, like I said, and I worked in companies like Interwoven and small companies like Zora, and then also had the privilege of working in larger companies, like companies that acquired the company that I worked for, turned out to be HP, and then working for Oracle more recently. In the last couple of years, I worked for a company called Redis Labs, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit, where I ran the product marketing team as well as developer advocacy. And for the last year and a little bit over a year, I've been running product marketing and developer advocacy at Nutanix. And we'll get into some real life case studies as well in the live class. But for now, one of the things that I really enjoy about both product management and especially product marketing is the work that you do starts from a clean sheet of paper. It doesn't exist. But just like NPD, you think about something, you bring it into a reality, and then you're able to see your work, which is incredibly satisfying. And one of the things that I really enjoyed when I was at Redis Labs was a campaign that we ran and we launched it. It was called I Love My Slow Database, Said No One Ever. And what you see here on the screen, of course, is if you were driving down 101 in the Bay Area, which is one of the main highways over here, you would have seen the billboard. And if you flew around Seattle or the Bay Area in the airports, you would see the sign as well. So a lot of my friends would go take pictures and send it to me and say, hey, is this your work? And I would say, yes, this is one of the things that we did absolutely from scratch. And it was immensely gratifying to go then see it. And now there's a lot of companies who are doing something similar in terms of campaign. So let's talk about NPD, or new product development. A few years ago, when I was speaking as part of MSI, or Marketing Science Institute, uh, I met Professor Carl Mela from Duke University, and he said, hey, I really enjoyed your talk. It'd be great if you came and talked to my students about new product development. And he said, well, would you be willing to come and talk about NPD to my students, because I teach at an MBA school? And I said, sure, I would love to do that. And then the first thing I did once I got back in front of the computer was to then Google NPD. And if you Google NPD or new product development, this is kind of something what you would end up seeing. It talks about how you think about an idea, you talk about how you screen the idea, you develop the concept and so on, and then you build out the product. And this is great. But when I looked at it and I thought, well, I've been doing this for a few years now, and especially in the technology sector, the new product development is not like this. So I asked Professor Carl Mela, and then of course Professor Jordan, of course, is it okay if I talk about NPD from the context of technology sector? And the reason for that, I felt, was because every company that we are now encountering are slowly turning into technology companies. And they said, sure. So today I'm going to be talking about NPD, but specific to the tech industry. And so every year, if you think about, before we get into how NPD is different technology, if you think about new product development, this was true. This process of a new product development was true for years and years. And what effectively this means is we had entire companies that were built around product. A product was something, or even today it's true for a lot of companies, it's very centric to an asset. You build out an asset. So you have an idea, you create a product, then you ship it, you market it, you sell it, and then at the end of the day, once you have scaled enough, you increase the price, you lower your cost, that increases your margin, and that's how new product development plus launch typically ends up happening. And this, like I said, is very product oriented. So everything within a company would be around product, whether it's departments, people, the processes, were all around product. And in this model, the customer is really a means of a distribution channel. A customer is a way to dispose of your product. You don't know your customer, you know your product, and based on who you're selling to, your entire process is around product. But this, of course, has been changing in the last few years. And in the last couple of years, I've been coming to Duke and talking about how the number one thing that has been changing is that most companies are turning into technology companies. And in fact, we have seen 3 or 4 industrial revolution going from mechanical to electrical to digital to now with AI, even an intelligent digital transformation, one would say. But one thing that really sticks out is that over the last 20 years or so, not only humans and companies have started to use more software, some really good companies or successful companies have turned into a software. So if you think about it, Uber is a software or an app on my phone. Trunk Club is another app or software on my phone. So is Peloton. So the idea here is that not only we are using more software, companies have turned into software. And the idea that I used to talk about is that over a period of time, this has accelerated. And whether you're just building a product that's for retail or if you're building a product that's in tech industry, each one of these products or each one of these companies, I should say, are turning into a technology company. But this year or last year, I would say 2020 turned out to be very, very different in many different ways. And to say that it was different is kind of an understatement. But I'll tell you from my personal experience, I had three life changing events that happened. My son, he turned 16 and he learned how to drive and he got his license during the pandemic. Second, he applied for colleges in this year as well. My father, who lives in India, he had a critical condition and he was taken to ICU. He survived, thankfully. He's out of the hospital and he's well. But I had the chance of being sitting here, unable to do something in physical reality, but being able to talk to my father even when he was in ICU through video conferencing. And third, my wife just changed her job and she did everything through Zoom. So the number one thing that has happened in 2020 is, of course, Zoomification of everything, in the sense whether it is education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's transportation, everything has now turned into video conferences, to say the least. But what really changed is from a business perspective is the fact that the thing that I used to talk about, that digital is accelerating, in 2020, it became digital is now table stakes. So, what do I mean by digital? And by digital, what I really mean is that anything that you were doing physically has now moved to digital, whether you do it through Zoom, through applications, through website, or whatever other means you have to communicate or do your business without physically meeting somebody is digital. And so, of course, we saw Zoomification of everything, education, healthcare, work. And with 2020, digital now became just table stakes. Companies that were not able to go digital overnight just went away. I mean, if you look at some of the examples of companies that no longer exist today but existed 12 months ago, some of them are my favorites, like Specialties was a great lunch place. It just went away after a few months into pandemic. J. Crew announced his bankruptcy, and then a whole bunch of gyms, 24-hour fitness and Gold Gym, for example, they also filed for bankruptcy. But the really positive story out of this is a gym that I used to go to. It was called NC Fit. And overnight, when all the gyms were shut down, the owner, Jason Khalifa, he announced that you can now download an app or go to the website and you can follow along the coach doing the exercise with you. And instead of the regular membership, you now just pay 1/4 of that membership, but you have, over a period of time, hundreds of these videos that you could just watch and follow along. And very quickly, this entire company evolved from being absolutely physical to now being a digital, and it has survived so far. So that's actually a very positive example of something that went to digital in 2020 and did survive. So if you all agree that digital is now table stakes, and this is going to affect any or all of the products, at least that you would be building out as you go out into the world, then we have to be cognizant or aware of some fundamental tenets of digital. And in my mind, there are three. Number one, all digital should have a zero touch experience. If you think about it, it's not just a zero touch experience from the perspective of, oh, I don't want to go to a retail store and talk to a human and buy something. It is zero touch from a digital perspective, in the sense, if I want to evaluate a product, if I want to look at what other people are saying about the product, if I want to purchase the product, if I want to get service related to the product, It is all through a digital experience, either through an app or through the website, but you are responsible as a customer directly of doing it 24/7 without talking to a human being. Two, anything that you build in a zero touch has to be measured. If you are the product owner, if you're a product marketer, you have to understand how your customers are using your product and your experience so that you can take the feedback directly without having to go talk to your customers. Great example for this is Netflix. It used to be that Netflix would ask you at the end of any show that you watch, rate it from 0 to 5 stars, or actually 1 to 5 stars. But a few years ago, it did away with that feature, and now there's only thumbs up and thumbs down because Netflix knows how many programs do you watch, how often do you watch TV, what kind of shows do you watch, and based on that, it gives you recommendations. It enables stickiness based on measurement. And the third piece I would say about digital is that you have to move fast. You have to be incredibly agile. And the example that I like to give is that of Tesla. Tesla releases a software update for its entire system every few days. And in fact, a great example of moving fast when it comes to digital is when somebody tweeted a few months ago about how some Tesla owners, they would go and park their cars at the chargers. I mean, even if their cars have charged, they would just leave their cars there. So somebody tweeted as a rant, and Tesla, including Elon Musk, responded to it. They added a feature in a couple of days after that tweet that prevented people from leaving the cars on without a penalty. So if your car has been charged and you've just left your car over there, beyond a certain time, it starts to charge you money. And of course, people then realized and moved away. But it's an incredible example of how quickly some customer provided feedback on a social media, and the company took that feedback and then, of course, went back and made that change incredibly fast. But then again, just like anything else, Tesla is another example of how they measure everything, and based on the information they already have, they give you a service that's highly personalized and customized to your needs. So I used to talk about how digital is accelerating, and in 2020, of course, digital has become table stakes. But the second thing, and the most important thing that has not changed, and of course, some would argue has accelerated as well, is customer centricity. It used to be that you created the product and then everything was around product. There are a lot of companies, the first example that comes to mind is Amazon, which are incredibly customer centric. Think about the experience that you've had on Amazon, which started off with, you bought a book, and then over a period of time, you started to buy gadgets, and now everything that you currently need is available on Amazon. That's why it's called A to Z. And unlike another company, for example, I'm going to use something like Walmart, where you walk in before the pandemic, of course, and you purchase something, the checkout counter knows nothing about you. You just go in, you purchase your thing, you pay for the amount for the product, and you're gone. In Amazon, when you go to the website, even when they have a physical bookstore you go to and you use your ID, they know everything about you. They know how many products you've purchased, when was your last purchase, they know the recommendation. It's not around the product, it's around you, the customer. And so customer centricity or customer centric NPD is what we're going to talk about. So we talked about some fundamental tenets of digital. What are some of the tenets for customer centricity? Well, for first, the customer always has to be in control. If you are trying to build something that is customer centric, the customer should always have a freedom of choice. If you look at a Best Buy example, if I make a purchase today, I have three different options. I can either go and pick up what I just purchased in a zero touch experience, and they will bring it to me in the car, in the parking lot, or at the curbside. Number two, I could go inside the store if I feel safe and then go get it directly from the counter. Or number three, they can ship it to you directly at your home. So I have freedom of choice. I have optionality. I have a number of different ways I can interact with. Some people, they might call it accessibility. But the idea is it's the customer that's always in control when you talk about not a product, but a customer centric NPD. Number two, because it's a customer centric, you have to think about how do you create an experience versus just a transaction based on a product. And that experience, then you just give it away for free before you ask for a fee. And a lot of companies also call it the freemium model. But a great example is that of Dropbox. If you think about Dropbox, they give you 100 GB or whatever for free for a year, and they don't charge you for any money. It's only when you start storing your children's and your family's pictures and your files that you realize that there is value out of it, and you would rather pay $100 to keep that. And that's a critical part of it. One, it's no longer a product, it is an experience that's centered around the customer. And two, because it's an experience, you want to prove its value. And the way you prove its value is you give it away for free. And there are different strategies of how you do it. There's a freemium is one of the strategies where you give the entire product functionality away for free for a certain time. And then within that certain time, within the application and experience, you're doing things to make the customer adopt your product and be more sticky. And number three, because it's an experience, it's no longer a transaction. It's no longer walking into Target or Walmart or Kmart for that matter, making a purchase and forgetting whatever you bought. It is more about a relationship. If you think about all the groceries that's coming to the houses, I can give an example of what we do. They're also subscriptions. They're no longer transactions. It's no longer me going and purchase my groceries once a week and then swiping my card. I go to an app and, there are examples like Good Eggs or even Instacart, where you have your entire list. And then every week you go in and say which ones are things that you need to replenish or which ones you don't. And it arrives in your house and they charge you a subscription. So again, now it's about your customer and it's about a relationship with the customer. It's no longer about transactions. So there's one important piece of this entire talk that I want you to take away is this, that of course, things have gone from physical to digital and digital is now table stakes. But the more important transition that has been going on is a shift in the business model, a business model of what used to be product centric to now subscriber centric or customer centric. This diagram is probably the most important diagram of this entire presentation, or the most important point of this entire presentation. And it's from a book called Subscribe, written by Teen Zhu. And Teen is the CEO of Zora. I had the privilege of working with him and at Zora for a couple of years, long before they went public. And the entire thesis of the subscription economy is very similar to what you see at Amazon, or very similar to what you see in Instacart, or very similar to what you see in Uber. It's not a product, it's an experience that is centered around the customer. And the customer is you. And based on the measurement that you get around that customer, the data gets richer and richer so that the recommendations and the personalization makes the entire experience turn into a relationships. And that's the difference versus what you saw in the earlier model where you created these products, you found a distribution channel, you do the 5 Ps, and then of course, a customer was just a means of disposing of your product and you didn't know anything about product. An example that I like to give a lot, also from the same book called Subscribe, is that of Fender. If you think about it, in the United States, there are some estimates that 1 in 10 homes own some sort of a guitar. And this is a Fender guitar, for example, but that guitar could be, one of the many different products that exist today. But the reality is 90% of users who pick up the guitar after they make the purchase, they quit in the first 6 months. So Fender looked at this data and they realized that people who actually quit playing the guitar, or they buy the guitar and they don't do anything beyond it, are the ones who have difficulty in learning how to play the guitar. But people who actually persisted beyond the first 6 months and picked up a few chords, they end up buying 8 to 9 guitars in their entire lifetime, which is huge if you think about it, because now that same person has become more of a relationship versus you just selling a guitar to an unknown person. So what did they do? Well, what they did was they created something called Fender Play. Fender Play is an app that you can sign up for as soon as you buy a Fender guitar. And when you go to Fender Play, there are a number of different lessons and videos that show you very quickly and easy how to start playing the guitar. And when you do sign up for that, now you have a Fender ID. That Fender ID also knows the kind of guitar that you've purchased, because you could register your guitar, you can fine tune your guitar, and if you make all the connections, the app now knows more about you and your experience with the product, which is the guitar in this case. And what they found was that people who now start to learn a little bit faster end up now playing longer and then end up becoming more of a customer relationship versus somebody who would have just purchased the guitar and Fender wouldn't know anything about them. So let's talk a little bit about what are the steps. Let's say now you've been asked to go and create a new product, and you're part of the team now that is responsible for NPD. Again, remember, there are two fundamental things to remember. Every company is a technology company, and digital is now table stakes. If you do not have a digital version of the entire experience of whatever you're creating with your product, you have a very low chance of surviving in today's world. And number two, in technology and in digital, customer centricity is paramount. You have to take care of that. So how do you create a new product? Well, the 5 steps. Number one is you have to find the pain point and you have to define your ideal customer profile. And this, to me, at least in my experience, is probably the hardest, because how do you come up with a pain point when we live in a world where there is 10 varieties or 10 versions of everything that you need, whether those are shoes, whether those are technology gadgets, whether those are experiences, digital experiences. There's not one, but there are 10 or more of each one of these. And the reason for that is there's very low barrier for people to create their own businesses these days. So how do you come up with something that is unique? And how do you come up with something that actually solves somebody's problem? And to that, I always say you start off with your intuition. Because I was a journalist 20 years ago, I have a certain intuition about journalism and the pain points over there. If I now go do some more research, I have a hypothesis. That hypothesis is the starting point of a product, or I would say an experience, which you would see. Two, when you start to define the pain point, you have to define who is it for. What does your ideal customer look like? If you look at Peloton, for example, their ideal customer profile are people between the ages of 30 to 45 who have a lot of, or at least a decent amount of disposable income, but they are short on time and they still want to have the community part of exercising. So they came up with the whole notion of not the product, of an experience where you go in and you sign up for a subscription and now you're exercising with other like-minded folks and you use a machine, and those machines are things that you pay for, but the product itself is the experience. It's the subscription, not the machine that you're using. And it's based on the pain point that there is a demography of people who have a substantial amount of disposable income, but they don't have enough time to go to a gym. Number two, once you have nailed that, or at least you have a hypothesis, the next thing you have to do is to design the experience. Again, design the experience, not the product. And there are a lot of, I would say, design thinking methodologies that you can imply or apply in order to do this. You have to empathize with your customer. You have to define, you have to ideate, you have to prototype, you have to test. And this goes on for a number of different cycles before you actually take it to the market. I will send you some links, or I will add some links on how you can go learn a little bit more about design thinking. But typically, the key thing over here is again not the product. You start from the ICP or ideal customer profile, and you define based on that pain point what does the customer journey look like. And you do that by creating storyboard characters and scenes, and then start to build out what is that digital part of it and what is the physical part of it, if there is a physical part of your overall experience. Then, number three, you have to start small and then iterate. And when I say start small and then iterate, this is something that came out of the tech industry again called MVP, or minimum viable product, which got popular a few years ago. But I'll give you two examples. One example is of Gmail. Gmail was launched in 2004, and it always had beta right next to it till 2009. And Google, very famously at that time and probably even today, they always talked about building a product, keeping it in beta, because they're constantly measuring and iterating through it. And that's the whole notion of starting small and then iterating. And in fact, in 2009, the only reason why they removed the beta sticker from there was because when they started selling to enterprises, enterprises had rules that said you cannot make a purchase for beta product. So just to be cheeky, what the Google engineers did, they said, we are removing the sticker for beta, but the products are still the same. By the way, if you like the beta sticker, you can go into settings and you can bring it back on your own, on your personal account. But the second example I like to give is that of Kanye's West album called Life of Pablo that came out in 2016. When he released it, it was not complete. He released it to his fans, and then over a period of time, when he kept getting feedback, he went on and continued on adding to it to finally brought it to a place where it is today. And a lot of singers have started to do that. There's a lot of examples over there where people just bring the minimum viable or the minimum lovable product to the market, gather the feedback, also have measurement and telemetry, and then based on that, continue to iterate. Which brings me to the fourth thing, which is measure everything and change fast. The example I gave of Tesla, but if you look at Netflix, it's the same. If you look at all the applications that's sitting on your phone, it's exactly the same. The application knows how many times you've used your application, how often do you use it, and based on that, the really good customer-centric ones make changes. I'll give you another example. I like running. I like running long distances, and a few months ago, I bought this thing called Milestone Pod. Milestone Pod is something that it's kind of a wearable, but it gives you some granular details about how you run. And it gives you then recommendations about how should you run in order to improve your performance. So the first time I purchased it, I tried to connect it through the Bluetooth through my phone, and I was about to go for a run. It took me about 15, 20 minutes, and it kept throwing an error. And after a while, I just got frustrated. I just dropped it on the table, didn't use it, and went out for my run, and came back about an hour later, and I found an email. And the email was from Milestone Pod, and they said, hey, Madhukar, it looks like you tried to connect your Milestone Pod to your phone, and it failed, and we did our own diagnostics and realized that you have a faulty device. Don't worry, we have shipped you a new one, which will be arriving in 2 to 3 business days, and there's no charge at you. That's the perfect example of how you've taken a product which has inbuilt telemetry in it, but you do something with it along with the support and other backend stuff. You actually end up doing something for your customer. That's why customer centricity. And you do it without even asking the customer on what exactly went wrong because you measured everything. Number 5, you launch the product. And when you launch the product, you have to work with marketing, sales, and service. In fact, we'll talk about in a live class, I'll talk about a real life example on how we did NPI, a new product introduction. And things when it's digital, things when it's more customer centric are very, very different if it was product centric. Think about a product, and a great product is, I would say, a movie. You create a movie, or the studios would go create the movie, and then it find the distribution channels and go out to the movie theaters, and then you distribute it. And so your marketing and sales follow the product. It is all about the product. But now marketing and sales is different. The product that my team was responsible for launching, we launched not once, but we will be launching it 3 times. And we're doing it completely through Zoom and through virtual events. Why are we doing it 3 times? Because every time there is a change in your product, or there's a new significant update that you're doing, or if you're going after a brand new market, that is a launch by itself. Every time you do that, you have to enable your sales team if it's a B2B product. And your service team or your support team has to be updated as well. So, what used to be just a one time thing where you created the product, find the distribution channel, you did the sales and marketing, and you're done, has now become circular, or it's almost like an infinity circle. And that brings me to the GTM framework, or the go to market framework. When it especially comes to technology and comes to B2B, you have to define a framework where you have to set your objectives and the opportunity. What is the segment of customers and ideal customer profiles that you're going after and targeting? What are some of the use cases depending on the pain points that you have solved with your product? If you're working with the sales team, what are those sales plays? As part of those use cases, what is your message platform? What is the branding that goes along with it? Then how are you going to enable the sales and the marketing teams? How would you create programs for demand generation, also digital? And finally, how would you measure and optimize it? And what I think about GTM, if you think about it, there are so many products today. And when products becomes a commodity, it's the GTM that becomes your USP. So this has to be really sharp. It has to be well defined, and you don't have to necessarily worry about, oh, my competition has the exact same product with the very similar functionalities. You have to be very, very focused about your go to market, who you're going after, what pain points are you trying to solve, and how are you building your relationship with your customers versus just taking a product and then throwing it out there. So just to recap, the key takeaways is to define a pain point and your ideal customer profile. 2, build an experience, not the product. 3, start small, but then iterate. 4, you have to build telemetry within your experience so you measure everything. And based on that measurement, you should be able to change fast as well. And finally, think about subscription services, not just product transaction. And when you think about subscription services, that's when you think about how am I going to make sure that my customer renews the service with me. That's when you become truly customer centric and provides the thing that the customer really need in order to have a longer relationship with you. Finally, one last thing I would say before I close out, and then we'll go into a live Q&A, is this is an experience that I've had every time I have been responsible for taking a product and taking it to the market. There's a Japanese concept called Wabi Sabi, and I'm a big fan of that. And if you think about what Wabi Sabi says, it has 3 principles. If you look around the nature, and what monks used to do is to take their inspiration from nature, you would see 3 things. 1, it's never complete. 2, it's never perfect. And 3, it doesn't last forever. And if you look at the Zen garden, or even if you go outside and look at nature, you would see this as a reality. The nature is never ever complete. It's never ever perfect. And it never lasts forever. It keeps changing. So you have to keep in mind, this is the fundamental tenet of NPD for customer centricity. In the sense, anything that you create today, it's never going to be complete. 2, it's never going to be perfect because you'll continue to iterate. And 3, it won't last forever because things are changing so fast. So I hope you found this useful, and I'm open to now questions so we can talk about, a real use case. And if you have any other question, I'd love to answer now. Before I go, though, you can contact me through a bunch of different ways. One, you can send me a message directly on LinkedIn. I also am on Twitter, but I'm not very active. But you do follow me, I'll follow you back. And then you can DM me, or you can send me a direct email directly at the email address on the screen.